right, I just need to ask you really your name and date of birth just to confirm I got it right, and then I'm going to see you want a glass of water or something. What's your first name?
This right here is Nicholas Cruz.
I hope your ever-breathing moment here on earth is miserable, and you repent for your sins, Nicholas, and burn in hell.
Back in 2018, he did something unbelievably unforgivable, being the Parkland shooter of a high school. And ever since then, he has been playing up for the cameras and pretending to be severely mentally ill. As soon as Nicholas got arrested even, he pretended to hear voices, that the demons and the voices in his head told him to do this.
Voices.
Yeah, no problem.
Voices.
Voices and demons?
Where's the voices? What happened?
Shut up.
He's been acting up this charade as a way to try and get out of any consequence of his actions that he did in 2018. After being checked and evaluated, he's interviewed in this clip right here, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen around about now, where he acts completely okay, completely fine, but looks up and sees the camera, and ever since then has been trying to convince everybody that he is severely mentally ill. One of the many issues that a lot of people have with this is the fact that Nicholas here actually created a video talking about exactly what he was going to do on the day he was going to do it without any hesitation in an earlier video prior to the actual shooting.
My name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next of 2018. Location is Stone Douglas in Parkland, Florida.
In the clip, you can clearly see he is perfectly sane, with no mention of any voices telling him to do this. With many years after the court case finally taking place, before Nicholas here got his sentence, they touched on the fact about with his mental health and how he was clearly faking, that his readings on the charts were completely off the scale, and even sat down with a psychiatrist to talk about exactly how he was faking. In this video, I want to watch some of those clips with you and just watch and see how grossly overplayed this whole situation is. Again, more of a serious type of video for today, and I really want to treat this with the most upright respect, and the actions that Nicholas did in 2018 is just absolutely horrendous.
He's grossly exaggerating severe mental illness.
State rebuttal witness Dr. Robert Denny.
This is what you see when somebody's playing games with you. He's grossly exaggerating very severe psychiatric problems, as well as somatic concerns, body concerns, cognitive concerns, and memory complaints.
Evaluated the Parkland shooter.
If its attention problems were as bad as this, he couldn't actually take the test. It just doesn't make sense.
Presenting data.
His scale is, as you can see, almost off the chart, with him attempting to look very, very bad on this test. That's an indication of pretty extreme exaggeration.
So with the common theme of criminals trying to get off the legal system with mental health issues, what exactly was Nicholas Cruz actually trying to fake? Well, apparently, Nicholas Cruz was trying to fake something called FASD. With this article saying, Nicholas Cruz defense says his brain was poisoned by birth mother's addictions in the death penalty trial. FASD can happen when your mother is drinking alcohol or taking other substances while pregnant. Best explained by this gentleman here.
What is FASD? FASD stands for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Many people may have heard of FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome, or FAE, fetal alcohol effects. When I was adopted around the age of 3, the home I went into, they were informed that I had, at the time, the diagnosis of FAE, fetal alcohol effects. A few years ago, it was changed to fetal alcohol spectrum disorder because it's a spectrum, and many people are affected differently. How does one get FASD? Well, that's when the mother drinks alcohol during her pregnancy. And then the child is born with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder affects the brain, affects the body, affects the individual in so many different ways.
So if that's exactly what it is, then does that explain what Nicholas Cruz did? Could that maybe perhaps explain the evil things that he did in 2018? Well, apparently no. From this short clip that I saw as well from the psychiatrist talking in the trial, and as they asked him, does any of this explain Nicholas's behavior whatsoever. Take a look.
Blaming the victim. That's very typical with antisocial personality.
If mom had lived, I wouldn't have done this.
Oh, right, yeah, exactly.
If someone didn't give me a nasty look, I wouldn't have gone back and shot them again.
That's a perfect example of what you see with antisocial personality disorder.
Does FASD explain the detailed planning of the massacre by the defendant?
No.
Does FASD explain the animal abuse?
No.
I burn, I torture them, I skin them alive, I shot them, I usually play with their dead or I eat them.
Does FASD explain his racist desires to kill people?
No.
Does FASD explain his desire to ruin Valentine's Day for the school and everyone associated with this massacre?
No, not at all.
Why Valentine's Day?
Because I felt like no one loved me. Didn't like Valentine's Day, I wanted to ruin it for everyone.
Okay, ruin it for everyone? You mean like the family members of the kids that were killed?
No. For the school.
Oh, for the school?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's like an attack against Dom and Douglas.
Basically, yes.
Does FASD explain the murder of Luke?
No.
Does FASD explain the murder of Martin?
No.
So with that defining the fact that FASD had nothing to play here in terms of the actions that he actually committed, what about maybe some of the tests that they did? Because believe me, they took a lot of tests to try and see what was actually going on in his mind. Again, they've mentioned plenty of times how he is just playing it up, and you can tell exactly that he is doing just that. You look at some of the tests that Nicholas has done here, and his charts, like the doctor said, are completely all over the place. Nothing seems to have any consistency whatsoever, defining evidence of what it's like when someone tries to fake this type of stuff. And while FASD can affect loads of things in your day-to-day life, such as coordination, learning, memory, academics, and logical testing, were done on Nicholas Cruz, and again, this is what they found after those tests.
On how Nicholas Cruz may have tried to trick a range of tests.
In plain words, was the defendant faking?
Based on my clinical judgment, I believe it was because he was trying to look more impaired than he is.
He said while Cruz underperformed on a visuospatial test, he seems to draw images of murder and firearms just fine.
He's got visual spatial skills.
And remember when defense expert Dr. Paul Connor told jurors after conducting neuropsychological testing he found mostly mild to moderate impairments in learning, memory, academics, fine motor speed.
Deficits in 9 out of the 11 domains that were assessed.
66 scores were not reported. They were not graphed. Out of those 66, 44 fell above the impairment range. Real-world function always trumps psychological test results. So if I have a test result that looks very, very impaired, but the real-world functioning demonstrates the ability that this test measures, one of them's got to give. And it's the real world doesn't give. The test data is wrong.
So I noticed as well in the last little clip there as well, when he's talking about all of this, and one of the defining pieces of evidence that just back this up in the fact that he's clearly faking is the fact that after this happened in 2018, literally minutes after, Nicholas Cruz actually went to a Subway straight after committing those evil acts and ordered food like it was nothing, perfectly showing that he had no issue whatsoever ordering a meal completely by himself. Not disorientated, not confused, 100% knew what was going on. The psychiatrist further stated and said,
according to clinical psychiatrist Dr. Robert Denny, who is one of just 7 in the world with board certifications in both forensic psychology and clinical neuropsychology, Nicholas Cruz had been faking the extent of his mental illness and cognitive issues and was clearly playing games during evaluations with experts. He testified that Cruz cheated during the tests and was grossly exaggerating symptoms of mental illness, poor memory, and other health concerns. For example, the results of his memory recall evaluation. Dr. Denny said that being unable to recall the correct words would show that Cruz had a free recall worse than severe dementia patients. But he said this was contradicted by the fact that Cruz repeated other words which he was presented with earlier on instead. The doctor said, "This is not what you see with real memory impairment. This is what you see when someone is playing games with you." He concluded that Cruz was trying to look more impaired than he is, and that the level of impairment which Cruz showed in some of his other test results were so severe that he would not be able to even take the test if it was true. He explained discrepancies between Cruz's attack and his relevant test results, such as motor control and balance. Another rebuttal witness, Dr. Charles Scott, diagnosed Cruz with antisocial personality disorder and also found that Cruz was malingering, where an individual intentionally fakes or exaggerates a condition or illness.
And then in the next clip, you're gonna see Nikolas Cruz's former psychiatrist talk about Nicholas's problems even when he was as young as 9 years old, and also talk on his past.
Jurors today saw this 2014 letter the shooter's former psychiatrist, Dr. Brett Negan, said he never received.
I had never seen it before the deposition.
Co-written by the defendant's school therapist at the time, warning that, quote, he dreams of killing others and is covered in blood and has a preoccupation with guns and the military. His last appointment with the troubled teen was just 6 months before the Parkland shooting.
The mood was good.
Yes.
Telling the state during cross-examination.
You are, of course, unaware that at this time, he's already considering being a mass shooter. You're not aware of that, are you?
No, I'm not.
Screaming and yelling a lot.
When Dr. Lori Karp first started treating Nikolas Cruz, the then 9-year-old was about to enter 3rd grade and on medications for ADHD.
Lowered the stimulant a little bit.
She makes tweaks to his medications, but as acts of aggression continue.
Threatened to stab the teacher and an aide. Hit a classmate with a lunchbox.
More changes to prescriptions.
In August, we added Intuniv.
His adoptive mom, Linda Cruz, a widow, then decides to take him off one of the medications.
Brother was also taking it, and at the time it was a brand name medication and it was expensive.
Linda was also managing issues with Zachary, Nicholas's younger half-brother, adopted from the same birth mother.
She was a good woman. She had her hands full. Her husband had passed and she had 2 boys with special needs.
The defense told jurors their client suffered prenatal damage because his birth mom was abusing drugs and alcohol while pregnant. During cross-examination, the state asking Dr. Karp,
do you think there's anything about your evaluations or treatment that would have led you to think that the defendant would kill 17 people?
No.
So with all that being said, I feel like it is safe to say, from how the professionals have looked at this, that the matter of the fact is that Nikolas is 100% playing up for the cameras. As terrible as his childhood may have been, it clearly didn't prompt for any concern for something as terrible as this. A lot of people will try and malinger and fake, as they feel like it's a way to really just escape the true punishment of the crimes that they have committed. For example, most people's thought process on doing so is that the law will just take pity on you. Maybe you get to go back home for a little bit, and maybe you might have someone come and visit you once a week, and that's really about it as far as a punishment goes, when that really couldn't be further from the truth. If indeed convicted and found to be mentally unwell enough to be a real cause for concern, you'll be sent to an asylum, which, by the way, they still have in the US, where not only will you serve your sentence, you'll be surrounded by people that really do have severe mental problems in an absolutely horrific environment of people screaming while taking a bunch of medications, and you will probably never be able to leave that facility ever in your whole entire life. Think about it. How could you then try and reason with a guard or anyone like that and just tell them that you're normal? Like they don't already get that probably all the time. The people that get sent there get evaluated thoroughly so they don't have to worry about that type of stuff. They're not going to look at you and think, maybe he's telling the truth. And if for whatever reason they then see you as mentally well and sane, they will conclude the fact that you probably lied, and then you will more than likely serve your full sentence. Now, the only benefit from doing this would be to escape the death penalty, which, if I'm not wrong, is most certainly a thing in Florida, which is where exactly this happened. With the end conclusion coming to the fact that Nikolas will serve a life sentence without the possibility of parole.
Will now look at this case and say to themselves, all I have to do is claim mental illness and I can get away with it.